close in the way we started. I refer to the discussion we had in the morning, the introduction by Uber Gams and our host, the Hungarian minister and the French entrepreneur. And I think it's a good reflection and sets very much the scene for today's discussion. I'm Antonella Correra. I am the Legal and Policy Officer in the Directorate General for the Internal Market, Entrepreneurship, Industry and SMEs. I am the team leader for the revision of the current late payment directive. And since 2015, I've been in charge with the implementation of the current late payment directive. I want to get back to what Mr. Uber Gams, our Deputy Director General, said at the beginning of the session. He said, we have to foster prompt payments because it is important to push liquidity to SMEs to create an ideal framework for entrepreneurs and innovators to prosper. This, I would also like to echo what our host, the Hungarian minister, said. And I still have in my mind what he said at the beginning of yesterday morning. Where is the money? Where is the money? Letta and Draghi report made very important considerations on how to turn around our economy and foster competitiveness. But where is the money? And this is directly relevant to the problem of prompt payment. Because let me tell you something, at any given point, companies are owed 10 billion euros in outstanding payments. So here, some money can come from there, don't you think? Finally, I would like to echo what the French entrepreneur said, and her words really stuck to my mind when she said it's important to foster values, to foster fairness, to foster benchmarks. And this is very relevant to what we are doing, especially in turning around the current culture on payments towards a culture that is too much focused on the issue of freedom of contract, towards a culture of fairness and social responsibility. In the annual report, we will see how is the situation of payments in Europe. This is not a very stellar picture. And it's a way to set the scene how and what is needed to do the turnaround that was very much pleaded by our host, the Hungarian minister, in order to change this current unfavorable tide of the payment culture and transform it into the key for addressing the problem that we have, this liquidity problem that we have, and create, therefore, a sustainable and create a landscape that is conducive to the growth and resilience of SMEs. I take the opportunity to thank all the team that work on the Observatory for the production of this report, in particular the members of the stakeholder forum. Some of them are here today. I would like also to thank the people that are following us online, from our invisible friends that are following us via internet. I want to thank you for your presence today. You're here today despite the fact that there were other interesting sessions, so this really means a lot to us. And I want to thank also EISMEA. By the way, they are paying for all this, so it's important. And I have the pleasure to pass the floor to Dr. Cinzia Alcidi. Cinzia is the Senior Research Fellow at the Center of European Policy Studies, CEPS, and she's also head of the Economic Policy Unit and Jobs and Skills Unit. And she's the Director of Research. Cinzia, prego.
Good morning, everyone. And many thanks, Antonella, for the very kind introduction. Indeed, CEPS lead the consortium which supports the DG GROW and the EISMEA in the implementation of the late payment observatory. Maybe just to recall that the observatory was created just 1 year ago, at the beginning of 2023. I think we made great progress on it. And since last year, we produce an annual report where we try to to highlight the developments and trends in recent years, and every year we try to dig into specific issues which can help companies to deal with late payment. And we also hope to actually highlight ways to improve the behavior when it comes to payments. So let me start. So the first thing I would like to highlight is recent developments in performance payments. And as Antonella said, this is not necessarily going in the desirable direction that we would like to see. And what we observe is that in 2023, the percentage of enterprises indicating that they have faced issues with late payment increased. So it went from 43 to 47%. So basically we are at the same level as 2019. After about 3 years of improvement, we are back to 2019. Maybe just to highlight a finding of last year, that improvements that we saw between 2020 and 2022, which in fact were crisis year, are most likely to be the result of the support of governments. For instance, working capital support during the COVID crisis and the energy crisis, rather than a structural improvement in payments behavior. The other thing that we observe is that the average payment period in EU has increased. So longer payment times, especially for B2B. So we are now at almost 62 days on average, so about 2 months. That's the average time of payments. Again, in line with the picture that I gave you before, we are back to the situation of 2019. Quite interesting to note that G2B, so when the government is one of the counterparts, so it's one of the clients, the payment time is higher, but it's rather stable. So this is so not much change over time, but higher than in business to business. Second finding, there is a deterioration in the payment performance across all sectors. You can see that the darker bar, which is higher than the lighter bar, that across all sectors there's been a deterioration. However, I want to highlight that there is a huge heterogeneity at sectoral level across countries. And maybe just to give you an example, the retail sector, the last bar, which seems to be the best performer across sector. In fact, it hides the worst and the best in terms of payment behavior. So the average is really hiding a lot of variation across countries and across companies. Then there are some sectors which are structurally more complicated, in particular the construction sector and the transport sector, and we'll speak about those sectors later in the panel. Last element pointing to deterioration of the performance is the percentage of payments by due date, so those who actually paid on time. And you can see 4 bars which are related to the size of the company. So what you find most on the left-hand side, micro companies, then when you go into the blue, you have the large companies. And what you can see is that systematically, the large companies have the smallest bar. So large companies tend to pay later than small businesses. And this is basically a sort of structural feature, because the same actually held also last year. Just a point to highlight, Denmark is, in this picture, clearly the best performer. So payments due by due date close or above to 90%. But I'm sure we will have a conversation on this point later on in the panel, also to explain what is behind this data. Now, the following question, given this evidence of somehow poor performance when it comes to payment, is really to try to understand, okay, why this is a problem? I think this is a quite fundamental question, and basically we highlighted 2 elements. The first one is sort of vicious circle. So first of all, what we observe is that companies which are paid late tend to accept the fact that the client pays later than the due time. And most companies basically claim that they accept these practices because otherwise they fear to damage the business relation and therefore being damaged over the longer term. But in practice, what accepting late payments implies is that companies which are exposed to late payments, they tend to pay late. So this is a sort of a vicious circle that may just amplify the problem. The second question, and this goes back to the point that Antonella made about the investment gap and competitiveness, these are two buzzwords in the policy debate, is that companies which are exposed to late payments, they often have problems or they indicate that this poses a challenge to expand their product or services offering. So it's basically tend to be an obstacle to investment, but also to improve sustainability, performance, and to invest in digital strategies. This is a particular concern for SMEs where digitalization can be actually a booster of performance all across the operations, not only for payments. And then I would like to draw your attention to two specific aspects. So this year we decided to dive into two questions. The first one is whether there is any link between cross-border transactions and late payments. This comes from the fact that there is a lot of emphasis on the functioning of the single market. And of course, a functioning single market implies that cross-border transaction or domestic transaction shouldn't have any difference. So it should be the same. So we wanted to check whether this is the case, and in practice we through the SAFE survey. This is a survey which is conducted by the ECB and the European Commission on companies about their behavior. Among the elements that are investigated, there is the turnover, the share of the turnover which is represented by exports, and the share of companies which are facing late payments. And basically what we saw, and I would like to draw your attention, I do not have the pointer unfortunately, I would like to draw the attention on the upper part of the figure, what is identified by the circle. And basically we found that the companies that are more exposed so the share of companies which are more exposed to late payments issues are those which have a relatively small share of exports, so less than 50%. So if you are a bit in the middle, if you are an exporter but not a dominant exporter, you tend to face more issues with late payments. So this was a bit puzzling because we couldn't understand the logic. So we actually started to speak to companies which export, but also to other economic actors which support exporting companies. And in particular, those provide insurance against credit risks and factoring. And basically, the message that we got is that companies which are a bit in the middle, so those who export parts of their production tend to resort to insurance services. So basically, in order to avoid to face issues which are related to late payment in different countries, where maybe they do not necessarily know the payment practices or they do not know very well the institutional framework, they are willing to pay a cost, either for factoring, so selling the credit, or buying insurance in order to minimize their risks. So in this sense, consider it, in order to put domestic and cross-border transaction on the same level, companies have to face a cost. That's basically the bottom line message. The other aspect that we looked into it is access to finance, and this is particularly important. So whether companies which face issues with late payments, they also face issues in accessing credit. And this is, here we really find a very straightforward relations quite strong relations. And I would like to bring your attention on this on the lower part of the chart. So this is an increasing difficulty in accessing financial services like bank credit. So on the right-hand side, you have the highest issues, and these are companies which experience problem with late payments. So there is really a very linear and positive relations between the two. So the more you are faced with issues of late payments, the more you face problem with accessing credit. But in fact, we did also some statistical analysis, and we found that also the relations going in the other direction holds. So if you have problems in accessing credit, you will also probably face issues with late payments. So, and again, these are issues which are findings which are quite relevant and point to why it is important to combat late payments. Then the last 2 points before I conclude. One important point, other than highlighting the issues related to the late payment, is really to understand what are the drivers of on-time payments. This is really taking a positive approach to payments. And basically, again, what it comes from, for instance, consultation with the stakeholder forum, which is for us a critical source of information and understanding how in real life payment performance work, is that the cultural element is very important. For companies which live in an environment where everyone pays late, it becomes normal to pay late. Of course, the opposite is also true. The second point is about the solid legal framework, which gives certainty. This induces some practices which lead to enforcement of the legal framework, and therefore more on-time payments. And I'm sure we will discuss this point in the panel. And then 2 final points. One is technology. And in particular, we found that e-invoicing, so electronic invoicing, enhances a lot efficiency. So it doesn't necessarily change the behavior. So a company wants to pay late, will not pay on time if there is e-invoicing. But the e-invoicing can eliminate a lot of inefficiency, errors, documents which get lost, and company losing time in following invoicing. If you're interested in this point, we published a report just a few months ago. You can find it on our website. And then the last point is financial literacy. This is a critical element for business relationships, and it's critical for SMEs. And then my very last point, I want to highlight the fact that despite the observatory is up and running, and we have done a lot of work to collect information. When it comes to the data, so the data that I showed you at the beginning, we rely very much on data which comes from private company, which perform surveys or analyze their data based on their business. So it's mostly credit managers or debt collectors, which have information about commercial transactions and then the behavior of company. And for instance, Intrum also run a service. So we rely very much on these companies actually sharing their information. But otherwise, we do not have data which are driven by statistical purpose, which ensure comparability and coverage, for instance, of all the EU countries. So this is, of course, a limitation, and it calls somehow for reflection on how to make sure that we can monitor performance in payments over time, and we can improve it. Maybe just one very last point, which relates to G2B, which is, in any case, an important element, especially when it comes to late payments. This is an area where the information is even more limited. Actually, there are a few countries, for instance, Italy, Spain, France, which have very detailed data, but most of the other countries actually publish no data. So it becomes very difficult to have reliable information about how governments actually, if and how governments pay on time. And on this, I will finish my presentation. If you want to know more, visit the website of the observatory. It's just called EU Payment Observatory. Everything is in there, and Maybe after the session, if you're interested, I'm available to answer questions and to exchange. And now back to Antonella. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cinzia. It was a very, very inspiring and interesting presentation, also for the angles covered very much. We will now continue with a discussion to focus a little bit on some aspects that emerge. I'm very happy to have with us today Jesper Beinov, please come, Desiree Paseiro, and Michael Badowski, and we will have a discussion with them. Desiree in the middle, yeah.
I can speak.
Yeah, you have to. Thank you. Sorry. We will have a discussion with our speakers today, and if you have any question, I hope that we can still have time to have a question and answer session. I'll start with Jesper. Jesper is the Deputy CEO of SME Denmark, but you're also the Vice President of SME United and the Chair of the Legal Affairs Committee of SME United. Jesper, it was very interesting in the presentation we had before that Denmark, it's a champion in prompt payment performance. But then in June this year, I read a very interesting article that was all over the Danish media. It was during the championship, during the football championship, and it says, Denmark is not doing well in the football, but in the meantime has won the European Championship in bad payment culture. And it was an interesting article because it was really speaking about long payment terms imposed on smaller suppliers, large companies paying late, unfair payment practices, and all despite the fact that Denmark has a prompt payment code. So can you tell us more about it, please?
Sure. Thank you very much. Yes, we have a real paradox here because Danish companies, they tend to pay on time. Danish public authorities tend to pay on time. But we have contractual freedom, so it means that basically the two parties, they can agree upon whatever they like. And we have here a situation where a great many of mostly bigger companies, they demand, as part of their business model, a longer payment period. So it's not unusual to see 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, or even 180 days. I used to work for a big Danish media conglomerate. At that time, it was a big Danish conglomerate. And we had the same practices. When we had the small clients, they had to pay within 14 days. But when we had subcontractors, we paid within 6 months. So this is not an unusual business model in some countries. And I can say regarding the championship, now we share it with Finland. And I think the Finns, they have some of the similar experiences that we do. I had a chance to discuss this with President Salminen of the SME United yesterday, just to clarify whether we had the same experiences. And it's not exactly one-on-one, but it's very close to. So we have this paradox between a liberal paradigm on contractual freedom and, on the other hand, the fact that actually companies pay on time.
Thank you very much. What solution do you think to this problem? What would be your views? So is there a way to address this? Because I mean, it's freedom of contract is good, is necessary, and this is exactly what the directive says. The current directive does not ban the freedom of contract. The expression freedom of contract in the current directive is recalled twice in the whole text, and it's always recalled as the abuse of the freedom of contract. So would you see that capping would help, putting a cap on the payment terms? That would be a solution to go, or would you have other suggestions?
Well, maybe I should start with von der Leyen's SME relief package that came some years ago. There were a very interesting survey on small European businesses on what they feared the most. They feared bureaucracy, and now we're addressing that on a European level, and we have had several discussions on this. But they also feared late payment or long payment terms, whether it's late payment or being paid late. And fourthly and third is about labor market shortages and skills and so on. So, but this is very distinct, and when we do surveys with our members, it's very clear to them that they have also experienced that some of the greater companies, also some very well-known companies, and you can look it up in the media. I don't want to name and shame anyone. They actually ask for 60, 90, 120 days. So we would be very much in favor of the proposal raised by President von der Leyen. And we have supported it, and I can say also in a European context, we've been very positive towards it. Then we can, of course, discuss modalities, whether it should be a proposal for regulation or proposal for directive, and what sort of compromises that needs to be made in order to secure that countries with different payment systems and history can also be in this.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jesper. One final question for you. An issue that has been very much debated about the proposal from the Commission is regulation or directive. Openly, what are your views on this?
I think in the ideal world, it would be good to secure single market competition and cross-border trade, that we had a regulation. However, there are, and I have really learned something from my experience with colleagues in SME United and in the world of small businesses. There are so much varieties. Some countries, they have arbitration system. Some other countries like Holland, they have special rules for larger companies vis-a-vis SMEs. So I understand that there are different cultures and business models working in these different countries. And that's also reflected in the discussions in the Council and in Parliament. And we had the Thun report before the European elections, luckily, because it meant that you have still momentum to fight the good cause for a more fair payment culture. But I foresee that if this should move in the Hungarian and the Polish presidency, you might consider changing it into a proposal for a directive, because it is simply not acceptable at the moment for a great many countries, and also there are divisions within the business organizations, to be frank. So we would support a good European compromise with the goal of improving the culture of payment, because we really need that with all the varieties within Europe.
Thank you very much, Jesper. That was very, very useful contribution. And thank you very much for being with us today. Now, with the next two speakers, we will touch upon the issue of enforcement. Cinzia, in her presentation, mentioned that enforcement is crucial for, it's essential for having a strong framework, and a strong governance framework for prompt payment rules to work. I have the pleasure of having here today with us Desiree Paseiro. She's the legal advisor in FENADISMER. FENADISMER is the Spanish Association of Businesses in the Road Transport Sector. We will speak from the issue of enforcement from the side of businesses. And I think you have a very important and interesting presentation to give us today. Gracias, Desiree, por estar con nosotros today.
Thank you very much. Yes, well, as Antonella has said, for us, enforcement is the key word. Spain usually had to deal with wrong behavior on payment. It was deeply rooted in all sectors of economy, the late payment behavior, and it was also in our sector, road freight sector. We represent an organization that is integrated by 22,000 companies. There are micro companies, small and medium companies, and many, many independent entrepreneurs. So we do know very well what happens with SMEs, and especially in our sector. The business tissue in Spain is mainly composed by small and medium companies. And in the transport activity, frequently there is a very long change of contractions from the client up to the last one at the bottom, which is the small and medium company, the independent haulier. Antonella said before, where is the money? The money is there. The money is between the client and the last piece of the chain, which is a small haulier. So generally speaking, we had lots of problems concerning late payment in Spain. And all sectors of activity were all time pushing on the need of having a way to enforce and to sanction those companies that usually had payments in a very, very long term. We tried to do so in many sectors, but fortunately, we arrived in our sector, in the road freight transport sector, to a regulation that established three important aspects, legal aspects and practical tools to improve the payment behavior. In October 2021, after a good struggle of our sector, but I have to say, without a great opposition from the administration, they were quite open. It was not difficult really to have them convinced to implement this enforcement regulation. We arrived to, I say, a law in which it was established a sanctioning regime. I don't know how this works, sorry. It's just like, yeah, that's it. We arrived to a sanctioning regime. Besides that sanctioning regime, in which all those companies that were not paying on time could be sanctioned and fined, there were also practical tools that helped companies to fight against late payment. And those were an anonymous complaint mailbox that was in the site of the Ministry of Transport, in which all those companies that were not paid on time could just write some information saying this client or this client is paying me in 120 days, let's say, in order to activate the inspection of the control inspectors of the Ministry of Transport that would take care to ask information to that company in order to see if they were fulfilled or not the payment terms. So with the sanctioning regime, the anonymous complaint mailbox, we also had another important tool, if you want to say, was a publication by means of the Ministry of Transport, so an official list of non-fulfillment companies, companies that systematically were sanctioned for non-compliance with payment terms. That is a measure that gives, of course, a bad publicity to those companies, and also gives the rest of the companies and SMEs in the transport sector an advice to see what companies have good or have bad behaviors on late payment. As for the sanctioning regime, which I think is the most important part, very interesting part, you can see that the fines were established depending on the price of the transport. We have, of course, the regulation of 30 up to 60 days payment. And in case of non-payment on time, we had a fine of, we could go from 1,000 euros when you have 400 euros, sorry, when your price, the transport price is up to 1,000 euros. And we can go to a fine of 6,000 euros when the transport price is up to 6,000 euros. But those fines could be also increased up to 30,000 euros or 18,000 euros, depending on certain factors, 80,000 euros. If it's a recurrent company that usually pays late and systematically pays late, so that fine of 6,000 euros can go up to 18, and we can go up to 30,000 euros if your non-compliance with payment terms is causing me a major damage, compromising my viability as a company. So those sanctions, those fines are essential to have companies in our sector modifying their payment behavior and little by little getting closer to the legal payment terms. Here you can see the payments and the evolution we had on those. We have in, well, I have to say that FENADISMER, our organization, rules since July 12, 2012, a permanent observatory of late payment on road freight transport. We have a lot of information of our members. We have invoices. We deal with their financial issues. So we had a lot of information that we could use to analyze how the payment behavior was in our sector, what instruments were used to pay our members, our companies. And with all that information, we could arrive to this data you have here. If you can see, in 2012, we have an average payment term of 111 days. In 2015, 88 days. We have an average payment term of 85 days. In 2016, in 2017, 86 days. 2018, 80 days. 2019, 80 days. 2020, 84 days. And we arrived to 2021. In 2021, there were an average payment term of 83 days. And in October 2021, this regulation I have talked about, sanctioning regime, mailbox, complaining mailbox, and publication of non-compliant companies started. So in 2022, we went down in the average payment term to 74 days. So from 83 2021 to 74 in 2022, 68 days in 2023, and 65 days up to October 2024. So we can see that the payment terms have been reduced in more than 20 days. So it is a clear proof that enforcement for us has been the only way to make companies to modify their payment behavior and to compromise. We cannot forget that our companies pay their supplies monthly. They pay diesel, they pay their employees in case they have. When they go on the route, they pay the peage. That is monthly. So if I get paid my services in 120 days, in 110 days, of course I'm financing the other ones. And just to finish, I want to extend myself very much. You can see here also that it's not only that payment have decreased, but also that the importance of the infringement has been every time less significant. So the damage of those companies that still do not fulfill the payment terms is minor, is less important than it was before. Now there is a big part of those companies that do not fulfill payment terms paying in more than 90 days. So we are almost in the term of 60 days, so 60 to 90 days, and the payments far from 90 days have decreased very, very much. You can see there we have payment terms going up to, for example, in December 2021, we have a 23% of the infringements that were payments above 120 days, whereas in October 2024, those infringements, severe infringements of payment terms above 120 days have decreased to an 8%, and the majority of the infringements are in the payment term between 60 and 90. So just to finish, once again, I insist that we believe that clear rules are absolutely necessary. It is necessary to harmonize payment systems and payment terms all over Europe. And unfortunately, most countries, at least in Spain, when you don't have an obligation, when you don't have, sorry to say, someone who is saying to you, you're going to be fined, you're going to be fined, you're going to be sanctioned, and you will have to pay, things go like that. So enforcement is absolutely necessary. We need to move the situation of the discussion of the late payment that is somehow stuck at the moment. We have to move it up. We have to obtain those payments of term with clear rules, and we have to obtain a system of enforcement in order to make those payment terms real and applicable. Yes.
Thank you very much, Desiree. It was a very interesting contribution also because what I find of the Spanish system is that this legislation was very much bottom up. So it really came from the businesses that were asking for enforcement of the rules. And the fact that it went straight on a hard law and you didn't even go through the codes, voluntary codes, it's really, this example is particularly, exemplary for the discussion on the fight against late payments. And on this note, enforcement is necessary. I now give the floor to Michał Badowski. Michał Badowski is a legal advisor in the Polish Office for Competition and Consumer Protection, UOKiK. And it's in Poland. There is one of the few member states where there is a very well-structured system of enforcement against late payment practices. Michał, thank you very much for being here with us today. Can you please describe how UOKiK works? Because I think it's very interesting also how you are articulated. I find very interesting also the fact that in UOKiK you don't have bank sanctions as soon as there is an instance of late payment. You have a whole system of accompanying those that infringe the rules with warnings, with education, and then so being the sanction, the solution of last resort. So thank you very much, Michał. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Antonella. Let me give you a little background on why we have assumed a rather strict approach to the combating late payment. Back then in 2013, when the late payment directive was first implemented in Poland, it was instantly perceived as a milestone on a path towards combating late payments and overcoming gridlocks. Had some key features like maximum payment terms, interest in commercial transactions, and a compensation for recovery costs. However, soon we realized that these measures were not perfect. They were insufficient, especially against large companies as acting as debtors, possessing stronger negotiation power than their creditors who were SMEs. Our approach relies on implementation of administrative sanctions. Since 2020, president of our office is been empowered to conduct payment gridlock proceedings and impose fines. You see, the Polish legislator came up with this idea that in some situations, late or non-payment can make an offense if it meets certain criteria. This is called excessive delay in payments in commercial transactions. Excessive delay in payments is the situation in which the total value of overdue payments in commercial transaction in the period of 3 consecutive months amounts at least 2 million zlotys, which is roughly €500,000. Well, there's a lot of questions. How do we receive the information about bad payers? Well, Theoretically, anyone can file a complaint about debtor responsible for late or no payment, but it's required to substantiate this allegation. You should bear in mind that it doesn't happen quite often because many companies, especially SMEs, are not really inclined towards taking legal actions against debtors responsible for late or non-payment because they do not want to jeopardize the business relations. This is exactly what Cinzia was referring to as a vicious circle. If you take a look at the survey found in interim European Payment Report 2024 versus slight percentage drop of creditors taking legal action against bad payers over past 3 years from 57 to 53%. That's important. That's why it's important that our proceedings are initiated ex officio by our president. They don't need any complaint or action of creditor against debtor. In most cases, we take actions based on what we call probability analysis, which basically scopes the potential bad payers. During this selection process, we rely on data received from National Revenue Administration that includes tax reports that companies are obliged to send periodically without being summoned. We also relied on statements concerning overdue payments from the last year that companies are required to send every year. You see, Poland has a sort of system of monitoring bad payments. The undertakings are obliged to send those reports about overdue.
It's in the law of 2018.
Yes, exactly. If you ask about administrative sanction, there's really no limit of this sanction, this fine. It is based on formula in which a total administrative sanction is a sum of partial fines. Each of partial fine is determined by the length of delay multiplied by progressing percent. Let me give you an example. The first partial fine is the total value of overdue payments up to 30 days and multiplied by 1. Then the second partial fine is the total value of overdue payments from 31 to 60 days, but multiplied by 2. This maximum administrative sanction is then mitigated, can be mitigated. We take under consideration the seriousness of this offense, circumstances indicated by the party, or even an attempt to change, improve payment practices. As Antonella has indicated, it's not always necessary to impose a fine on a bad payer. Since last year, our office may contact the companies suspected of settling their invoices outside the agreed time frame and urge them to improve their payments practices without initiating the proceeding. Then this company is contacted by us, is free to respond, usually within 14 days, and may submit the statement of its standpoint within this specific time concerning the payment discipline. We've already addressed this soft call to over 100 companies. Most of them responded and ensured us they were going to improve their practices. Some of them even responded they weren't really aware of the gap between offered payment term and actual invoice settling. If you are wondering about the cost of resources and the staff of this activity of enforcing, I must say it's quite demanding. We have to analyze hundreds of thousands of transactions and match them with payment records. Our task force consists of 70 employees that includes IT specialists, analysts, case handlers, and lawyers. Well, currently we are working on updating our procedures so we could improve our productivity.
Thank you very much, Michal. And did you find an improvement in payment performance overall since 2019, since the law entered into force in Poland?
Well, it's not easy to answer because in the middle of this period we have war in Ukraine, we have some other issues concerning inflation, but I think our proceeding resulted in awareness. This is like a positive effect, and I think we need time because these measures take a long time to achieve goals, which is promoting the culture of prompt and responsible payment.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think we still have 10 minutes, and I think we're happy to open the floor. Before we open the floor, I would like to thank again the speakers, because thank you very much for your testimony.
Hello, Ben Butters from Eurochambers, the European Association of Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much for the presentations. I think our position on certain aspects of the Commission proposal is pretty well known, and that we oppose the notion of imposing fixed limits on B2B payments for various reasons, one of which is this issue of contractual freedom, which to me goes with fairness and responsibility. I don't think you should necessarily juxtapose those concepts. My question, in the interest of time, because we've only got 10 minutes left, is you've been focusing very much on B2B payments during this session, and I think Desiree's presentation really demonstrates the power of sanctions, naming and shaming, fining people who don't comply with the terms of their contract, who pay after those terms, and we fully support that. But I was struck by one of the slides from the colleague from SEPS that public sector payment times haven't improved in pretty much any member state, and we've had the directive on late payments in place for over a decade now, if I remember correctly, which indeed very much focused on public payments. So I think that is critical to creating a culture of prompt payments, and public sector administrations clearly aren't complying with the rules that are already in place. So my question to the panel is, what more could be done? Should we be naming and shaming? Should we be imposing greater sanctions on public administrations that don't pay on time? They should be the ones setting an example. And if freight companies are introducing enforcement regulations that impose fines on companies within that sector, within their supply chain, let's follow that logic to the root of this problem and impose stricter sanctions. Let's name and shame administrations that are not paying. So what would the panel suggest that we do to ensure that public sector debtors pay their bills more promptly? Also, bearing in mind, by the way, that the public procurement rules put in place many strict requirements on any public authority before they even open a tender and sign a contract. So they shouldn't be doing that until the money is ring-fenced and available. So there's really no excuse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I give the floor to the panel, I just would like to answer as well. In the impact assessment that accompanies the proposal, there is one of the first graphics. It shows very clearly that since the implementation of the late payment directive, while the level of late payments of public authorities remain high, is the one that has gone down the most compared to businesses. Just for your information, the European Court of Justice issued just this year 2 judgments against 2 member states for the late payments against the public authorities. So the Commission is taking member states to the Court of Justice. Another one is pending, another judgment against another member state is pending. So, but more could be done if there is, as Cinzia was saying, unfortunately, public authorities do not collect systematically the information about their payment performance. Only a bunch of member states do so, and was only because they were forced to do so once the Commission opened infringement. So I think this is important message, and in the proposal that is now pending, there is an obligation for the public authorities to publish regularly information about their payment performance. So it is important that this proposal goes also, it's adopted because it gives us a way to monitor better the implementation by the public authorities. And I'll leave the floor to the panel in case they want to answer.
Sure thing, Ben. I fully agree with you. Naming and shaming is a good way of acting, especially as business associations or business organizations on a local, on a national level, whenever it occurs. Next year, we're going to have municipal elections in our country, and every time I meet a mayor, I have a list of questions that I ask, and one of them is, how is your business culture? And to give a specific example, Business Europe and SME United Danish organizations, they were actually both implying for the municipality of our capital to pay faster. And now the politicians has agreed that 1 week, 6 days, 6 working days is how bills are to be paid in the municipality of Copenhagen. So I think we have a common issue there. And when it comes to ensuring fairness in commercial transactions, well, we beg to differ, and that's fair.
Yes, I totally agree. I think public administrations have to show exemplarity in their behaviors, in their manners, in their payments, of course. In Spain, I can tell you that the payment terms usually from administrations were very, very, very, very high. But also administrations have shortened their terms. I think they are trying to do it much, much better. The delay of payment from administrations in Spain have lowered considerably during the last years. And I think little by little, all this culture is routine. And of course, we have to demand them to be the first to comply in payment. As for Spain, I can tell you also that although the sanctioning regime, I have just said, we obtained it finally only for the road freight transport sector. It was a demand of the whole entire economy, business activity. And the regulation was thought to be for all of us, so a regular national regulation establishing that sanctioning regime. Unfortunately, for several things, we didn't arrive to that. We could only have it for our sector, but I hope in not a very long term we could do so. Yes.
Okay, if you ask about Polish we also strongly believe in naming and shaming measure, and that's why we publish on our website the administrative decisions, including the imposing the fines, so anyone can look up to it. We are aware that they might affect the reputation, the goodwill of those bad payers, and raise awareness. They might warn potential business partners.
I think there was another question.
Hello, good morning.
Yeah.
Christian Mandl, Head of the European Policy Department, Austrian Federal Economic Chamber. I didn't see the figures about Austria, and I don't know the situation because I'm not an expert at late payment. But from the Austrian point of view, from the Austrian Chamber, we also, like Ben Butters already mentioned, we oppose strict rules about the time frame, because you have to bear in mind seasonal sectors, for example, in the fashion sector or in the toy sector, because companies are always ordering before in springtime or in summertime for the seasonal Christmas, for example. And then the partners agreed on a real long-term payment, because 70% in the toy sector, for example, is done in Christmas time. So the companies cannot pay beforehand until they have get the money from the consumers in Christmas. So that's the reason why I think there must be a sectoral approach, like you did in Spain, naming and shaming. And so I also would prefer to have economic freedom. Thank you very much.
Yeah, if I may.
That was not a question, though.
Thank you. And maybe because my question is kind of related to your comment as well. So my name is Burçak İnal. I'm with the European Banking Federation. And we have also been working a little bit on this topic. And the comment that we have heard from our members is essentially that they're exactly for the kind of situation that the colleague was describing, for the seasonal sales, where the cash flow will come later, and they're basically intertemporal mismatches. For those situations, there are currently financial sector solutions, factoring or reverse factoring, and which technically allow the ones who have to make the payments today to their employees or to their own suppliers to benefit from the payment now and not be exposed to the later sale of the product. What do you hear about these financial solutions? And would you think that it would be appropriate to still continue to accommodate them as a solution to these cases? Thank you.
Can I just a question? I just answer to this, and then I think we have to. Yeah. Okay. I just want to answer to this. There is a proposal that is currently basically the European Parliament made an presented its first reading to the proposal, and just to answer, it addressed the issue of seasonal goods, linking it to even giving 120 days for this kind of goods. So it has been taken care of by the Parliament, and we consider it's a good basis for negotiation. The problem is that it's stuck. Why it is stuck if addressed is already? The fact of freedom of contract, it's important, but again, the directive already limits this kind of freedom of contract. And it is not an authorization for an absolute term freedom of contract. It addresses the abuse of the freedom of contract. So it is necessary also that when freedom of contract is invoked, it's also necessary to show what is being done, that this freedom of contract is abused. So I think this is important as well. Again, the proposal from the Parliament in the first reading even admits and supports these financial solutions, because there is a specific unfair practice, which is the banning of assignments of credits. It's clearly written, so the proposal is there. Why it is being stuck? That's the thing. So we are in favor of these financial solutions as a Commission. So we very much believe in them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I will shout out from the the people that are watching online. So maybe you can use this one.
Thank you very much. My name is Alena Mastantona. I'm from the Czech Chamber of Commerce, representing mainly SMEs. And we actually admire all people who want to become an entrepreneur. So we never shame, we never have any kind of a blacklist. So we prefer to incentivize them. I would like to ask you if you know any kind of a best practice from member states when the public authorities, the government incentivized actually the companies to pay on time, for instance, through fiscal measures. An example like paying VAT only from invoices that has been paid. So any kind of carrots rather than the sticks. And when we surveyed our companies in top 3 challenges they have for next year, it's a lack of people, lack of qualified people, and bureaucracy. Bureaucracy, it's a number 1. Bureaucracy, 13,000 acts coming from EU level in the last 5 years. It's a lot. But what's also for them the biggest administrative burden, it's changing the rule. So I think we really have to look on how to accompany already the legislation we have into practice, and that's the enforcement, but through incentives and soft measures. And in this regard, I also aligned with Euro Chambers, and I was a rapporteur in the European and Economic Social Committee, which represent many of the business organizations, but also trade unions or consumer organizations, and we criticize a lot the proposal from the Commission.
There is, for best practices, I invite you to read the report in the European Observatory on payments from the governments. You will find it a lot. It's a report that has been published. So there are some examples of good practices there. So I invite you to read the report there.
My name is Daniele Diano. I'm Vice Chair of SME Committee of Business Europe. And SME Committee is against the regulation for the late payment in B2B. But I have a question to Mrs. Paseiro. Do you think, is it possible to transfer the regulation, the Spanish regulation in transport, also in other economic sector like construction or shipping company? What do you think?
Thank you. David Caro, European Small Business Alliance. I must disagree with Ben, and I think comments that have been made reflect the they represent to a degree. We represent the small and micro business sector, and I defer again to the comment on sectoral, and I think that's more important than a blanket, we will not have legal contractual terms. Small businesses, it's very difficult for us to complain and impose. And I think naming and shaming is fine, but for small businesses, you have very little choice of who you deal with. So you still have to deal with the named and shamed. So I think it's very important that there is some element of control on the size of contract. And if we have a sectoral approach, I think it's important that the sectoral approach also has very clear guidelines so they can't be abused. Because again, if you give a longer term because of the toy trade, for instance, there will always be people who will try and abuse those terms. And I think it's very important that there are those controls over that potential abuse. I think another aspect that we need to look at, and I think whether it's business to business or whether it's government to business, is supply chain and supply chain aspect of that, because what happens at the top of the supply chain rolls right down through the supply chain. And I think it's important that with local authorities, with government, when they give contracts, there's a huge supply chain that runs down to the small and micro businesses. If the government or the local authority don't pay on time, then those payments are withheld. But on the other side of that, if the local authorities and government pay on time, I think it should be contractually written that the various supply chains in that also pay on time. And a blacklist that can be created if they don't, of people who then government and local authority will not deal with because they're not following the terms, and then roll that to business, where you have the automotive or the pharmaceutical supply chains. And again, the head business If the companies below that are not paying their suppliers on time, it could disrupt that supply chain. So I think there's pressure there that if these large businesses impose on them that they pay their supply chain so that there is supply chain continuity and security, then I think that is an important pressure that can be applied to make sure the smaller micro businesses at the end of the chain get paid on time. Thank you.
I will answer the first question. I think it is easy to implement in other sectors of activity, and it is very possible. We count in Spain in the transport sector with one thing that maybe made things easier. Was that we in the ministry we have an inspection service. Inspection service in order to control how much they drive, the drivers, the rest, how transport contracts are fulfilled, authorizations in order to do those transport, international transport, etc. So there is a control body inside the ministry. And I think in those places in which there are already inspection services, it is very easy to implement. It's just to give one more thing to control besides all those that are used to be controlled in that activity sector. On those other activity areas in which there is not implemented or does not exist an inspection body, it would be a question of establishing a national or an organism to control this type of question, the payment, and thinking small and medium companies have a weak position in the contracting chain vis-a-vis their clients, and they are not going to claim against their client because I work mostly for you and it's going to be surely I lose my work. An anonymous complaint box in which you put and advise the administration, the control administration, bad practices are followed by this or this company, for sure may be implemented in a general basis. So I think it is perfectly possible, yes.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for all the good comments to the whole panel, but I took the floor just to say thank you to you, Antonella, and to the Commission, because you're doing such a great job on this. And Margrethe Vestager, in her final months as Commissioner, we hope she can have this agenda-setting power that the Commission normally have. Otherwise, I would say that we all count on the Commissioner-designate Stéphane Séjourné, where he, during the hearing, said something very important in Parliament. He said that we should think small first when we legislate in Europe, and that we should think small first, integrated in all parts of the process. So this gives me hope that the Commission will still pursue this question of more fair payment, and furthermore that we also discuss growth and competitiveness in these months. And as the excellent report showed, this is really something that is hampering investment and is hampering productivity. So if we get more fair payment, I'm sure that this can contribute to the growth and competitiveness of Europe. So thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank the speakers for their very interesting interventions. They're very interesting. I would like to thank also the participants. We might disagree or agree on certain points, but thank you very much. It's good that you were here. You even cut into your coffee break. So how can I say? I mean, this is very good for us as well. Very interesting. And before I leave, I would like to leave you with a quote from Lacordaire. Was a Dominican monk. It was quoted by Roja Thun when the first reading of the proposal was adopted. And it says, between the strong and the weak, between the rich and the poor, between the Lord and the slave, it is the freedom that oppresses and the law that sets free. So thank you very much.